The bridge of the UES Harmony hummed with quiet tension as Admiral Park Minji watched the alien message for what felt like the 100th time. The holographic display flickered, showing 3 different alien species speaking in their cold, mechanical voices. Each word felt like ice sliding down her spine. Humans of Earth Colony Designation Kepler 442b, the lead alien droned, its insect-like features twitching. You have constructed illegal settlements in space deemed unsuitable for primitive species. The Galactic Council demands immediate evacuation. You have 30 Earth rotations to comply. Lieutenant Commander Kim Tae-hyun shifted beside her, his jaw clenched tight. Calling us primitive while they can't even get our planet's name right, he muttered under his breath. It's not even our main colony, just 15,000 people trying to make a life. Park Minji nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the display. 300 ships dotted the sensor screen like a constellation of death. Each one was larger than anything humanity had built. Some looked like organic creatures with pulsing veins of energy. Others resembled geometric nightmares of metal and crystal. At the center of the formation sat the Vorthak Dreadnought, a ship so large it cast shadows across the smaller vessels. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Lee Soho from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the colony." "Put it through." Captain Lee Yuna's face appeared on the secondary screen. Behind her, Park Minji could see the prefabricated structures of New Seoul Colony through the command center's windows. Children played in the artificial gardens while their parents worked the fusion plants. "Admiral," Lee Yuna began, her voice steady despite the situation, "the colonists have voted. We're not leaving." "Captain, you understand what this means," Park Minji replied carefully. "They have 300 ships. We have 57. "Yes, ma'am. But this is our home now. My daughter took her first steps in the soil we brought from Earth. My son planted the first tree in our memorial grove. We didn't come all this way just to run at the first sign of trouble." Park Minji felt something tight in her chest loosen. These weren't just numbers on reports or strategic assets. These were families. People who had risked everything to build something new among the stars. "The Vorthak have never lost a battle," warned Commander Kim Tae-hyun. "Their reputation alone has kept the peace for over 200 years." "Maybe it's time their reputation met human stubbornness," Park Minji said quietly. She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to Earth Command, Priority Alpha. Tell them we're staying." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew what Priority Alpha meant. It meant war. "Also," she continued, "send a reply to the Galactic Council. Tell them, actually don't tell them anything, let them wonder what we're thinking." As her crew scattered to their tasks, Park Minji stared at the enemy fleet on her screen. Each ship represented technology humanity couldn't match. Energy shields that could deflect small asteroids, weapons that could crack planets. The Vorthak. Warships alone carried more firepower than Earth's entire space fleet. "We're really doing this," Kim Tae-hyun said beside her. "The colonists made their choice, now we make ours." Captain Oh Jae-min from the destroyer Dokdo called in from the fleet. "Admiral, we've got movement on the outer perimeter. Looks like they're positioning for a blockade." Park Minji walked to the main viewing screen. In the distance, she could see the first alien ships moving into formation. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly light, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," she announced across the fleet comm. "You all know why we're here. Behind us are 15,000 people who chose to call this rock home. In front of us are aliens who think they can push humanity around because we're new to space." She paused, watching her officers straighten at their posts. Perhaps they forgot something important about humans. "We don't back down from bullies. Not on Earth, not in space, not anywhere. All ships maintain defensive positions. Let them make the first move." As she cut the connection, Park Minji felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders. 57. Human ships against 300 alien vessels. On paper, it looked hopeless, but humans had overcome worse odds before. Outside the viewports, Kepler 442b rotated slowly, its surface a mixture of white ice and brown land. Somewhere down there, children were probably asking their parents why there were so many lights in the sky. Soon they would have their answer. Commander Zraktal's four eyes focused on the display screen showing the human fleet. His scaly fingers tapped the command console with slow, deliberate clicks. Each tap sounded like tiny bones breaking. 57 ships, he said to Second Commander Velthar, his voice carrying the deep rumble of his species. My personal battle cruiser could destroy half of them alone. Velthar nodded, her own eyes glowing with anticipation. Shall we demonstrate what happens when primitives challenge the Council's will? Not yet. Let them see our power first. Perhaps fear will make them surrender without blood. Zraktal gestured to the tactical display. Open all weapon ports. Charge the main cannons to full power. Let them watch their death approaching. Across the void, the Vorthak fleet responded. Massive energy signatures bloomed on sensors as hundreds of weapons powered up. The very space around the ships seemed to bend and twist from the raw energy. On the UES Harmony, alarms screamed warnings that every human already knew. They were vastly outnumbered. Their weapons were older, their shields weaker. By every calculation, they should run. Captain Cho Hyunwoo sat in his destroyer's command chair, watching the enemy ships charge their weapons. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. They all knew this might be their last day alive. Sir, called out his weapons officer, what are your orders? Cho Hyunwoo smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Remember what Admiral Park said. Let them make the first move. But while we wait, prep the suicide drones. All of them. Lieutenant Kim Ji-woo checked her equipment one more time. She led the Harmony's boarding parties, soldiers trained to fight inside enemy ships. It wasn't a job anyone expected to use against the Vorthak. Ma'am, one of her soldiers asked quietly, is it true their ships have no individual life support? Systems? That's right, Private, their whole species breathes the same gas mix. If we breach their atmosphere, the whole ship goes down. She loaded her plasma rifle with deliberate care. Remember that if we get the chance to board one of their vessels. Commander Zraktal watched the human ships do nothing. They just sat, there waiting. It annoyed him. Where was the panic? The desperate attempts to negotiate, the begging for mercy? Open fire, he commanded. The Vorthak flagship released its main cannon's energy. A beam of pure destruction lanced through space, striking one of the human destroyers. The ship's shields flared and died. Its hull cracked like an egg. But instead of exploding, something strange happened. The destroyer launched dozens of small objects. They moved like angry wasps toward the Vorthak fleet. What are those? Demanded Velthar. Scanning now, an officer replied. They appear to be empty ships. No life signs, but high energy readings. Captain Cho Hyunwoo's destroyer shuddered. As enemy fire tore through its hull, his bridge filled with smoke and sparks. Half his crew was already dead, but his plan was working. Now, he shouted into his communicator, all drones execute! The suicide drones reached the Vorthak formation. Each one was a small ship, packed with explosives and mass conversion warheads. They moved too fast for the aliens' targeting systems, weaving between massive warships like deadly fish. The explosions lit up space like new stars being born. 6 Vorthak cruisers disappeared in balls of fire. More ships lost shields and armor. The perfect formation scattered as captains tried to avoid the human weapons. But the humans weren't done. While the Vorthak fleet was confused, human ships darted forward. They didn't fight like any civilized species. They rammed enemy vessels. They fired at close range. They used every dirty trick they could think of. Lieutenant Kim Ji-woo's boarding pod smashed through a council cruiser's hull. She and her team moved through the alien ship like ghosts of death. They found the air recycling systems and introduced Earth bacteria. They sabotaged the gravity generators. Within minutes, the enemy crew was dying from causes they couldn't understand. Captain Cho Hyunwoo made his final decision as his destroyer died around him. Instead of trying to save his ship, he aimed it directly at the largest Vorthak battlecruiser. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. The destroyer's engines screamed as they pushed beyond safe limits. The ship became a missile weighing thousands of tons, moving faster than anything its size had a right to move. It struck the Vorthak ship's reactor core. The explosion could be seen from the planet's surface. By the end of the day, 20 council ships were destroyed or disabled. The humans had lost only 3 ships, though many more were damaged. Bodies floated in space from both sides, but the impossible had happened. Commander Zraktal stared at, his tactical display in disbelief. The numbers made no sense. How could these primitives hurt the mighty Vorthak? Impossible, he whispered. But the evidence floated before his ship in burning metal and cooling plasma. Commander Zraktal's rage burned like acid in his throat. 20 ships of his fleet had been turned to floating scrap by these human insects. The thought of reporting such losses to the High Command made his scales ripple with shame. No more games, he hissed to his tactical officer. Target the planet, all civilian areas. Show them the price of defying the Vorthak. Sir, the Council laws of war forbid. The Council laws apply to civilized species. Look at what these animals did to our ships. Zraktal's claws extended, leaving deep scratches in his command chair. They use suicide attacks, they poison our air, they fight like savages. The first bombardment began 30 minutes later. Plasma beams lanced down from orbit, turning buildings into glass. A school in New Seoul's District 3 vanished in a pillar of fire. Children who had been laughing and learning one moment were gone the next. Captain Lee Yuna watched from the colony's command center as death fell from the sky. Her hands shook as casualty reports flooded in. 500 dead. 1,000, 2,000. The numbers kept climbing. Get everyone into the underground shelters, she ordered, her voice cracking. All families to the deepest levels. But the shelters weren't deep enough. The Vorthak weapons cut through rock like butter. Families huddled together as their final moments arrived from above. On the Harmony, Admiral Park Min-ji felt each civilian death like a knife to her heart. She had sworn to protect these people. She had failed them. Admiral, Communications Officer Lee Soho called out, her voice tight. Priority message from Earth Command, quantum encrypted. Park Min-ji's hands trembled as she opened the message. 3 words changed everything. Authorization granted. Use all means necessary. Behind those simple words lay 15 years of secret development, hidden laboratories on Mars, test facilities in the asteroid belt, scientists working on projects that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed. All captains, Park Min-ji broadcast on a secure channel. Project Sunrise is active. All Yamato-class ships charge your primary weapons. All Taekwondo carriers load and prep for launch. Captain Song Junho felt his blood turn cold as he received the order. He commanded the Soul's Fire, one of only 3 ships equipped with the experimental Yamato cannon. The weapon had been tested once against an abandoned asteroid. The asteroid had simply ceased to exist. Engineering, he called over the comm. Status on the dark matter injector. Ready? Sir, but I have to warn you, we're using stolen Vorthak technology here. We don't fully understand what we're playing with. We understand enough, Song Junho replied grimly. Begin the charging sequence. Deep in the Soul's Fire, machinery hummed with deadly purpose. Dark matter, harvested from Vorthak wrecks and reverse-engineered by human scientists, began to flow into the cannon's core. Energy readings climbed beyond anything humanity had ever created. The Taekwondo missiles were equally terrifying. Each one was larger than a small ship, packed with quantum warheads and programmed with limited AI. They had been designed to crack moon-sized targets. Today, they would test against the Vorthak fleet. Captain Song Junho checked his timing one last time. The Soul's Fire had jumped into hyperspace hours ago, emerging behind the enemy fleet where sensors would be weakest. His ship hung in the darkness like a predator waiting to strike. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, the Vorthak flagship is directly ahead. Distance, 40,000 kilometers. Below them, the planet continued to burn. Orbital strikes turned cities into craters. The colony's population dropped by thousands every hour. Entire bloodlines were being erased from existence. Target locked, reported the weapons officer. Yamato cannon at full charge. Song Junho thought of the children in the school, the families, torn apart by alien fire. He thought of Captain Lee Yuna trying to save her colonists with nothing but hope and determination. Fire! The Soul's Fire shuddered as it released energies that shouldn't exist. A beam of twisted space-time and dark matter energy lanced out, moving faster than light itself. Distance meant nothing. Shield strength was irrelevant. The Vorthak flagship existed one moment. The next moment it was the expanding ball of plasma that outshone Kepler 442b's sun. For a single heartbeat, the bombardment of the planet stopped. Every ship in both fleets stared at where the massive flagship had been. Then the human counterattack truly began. Taekwondo missiles emerged from hyperspace, each one moving at significant fractions of light speed. They didn't just destroy their targets. They deleted them from reality, leaving only expanding spheres of energy where mighty warships had once ruled the void. Commander Zraktal, now on his backup command ship, watched his fleet die around him. The impossible had become reality. The primitives had weapons that made his technology look like stone tools. How? He whispered, watching another of his cruisers simply vanish. How do they have such power? The answer was simple, though he would never understand it. Humans had learned to turn their love for their families into unstoppable weapons of vengeance. At exactly 0600 hours, the galaxy learned why humans had been feared on their own planet for thousands of years. The attack began in 3 star systems. At once, as if some invisible conductor had raised his baton for an orchestra of destruction, General Ryu Sora sat in the command chair of the Busan Thunder, surrounded by holographic displays showing 3 different battles. Each screen showed the same story. Council ships dying faster than their commanders could count. Phoenix Team report, she spoke into her comm. Target destroyed, General. Vorthak's supply depot in the Centauri system is gone. Moving to next target. Ghost Squadron? Industrial platform eliminated. No casualties on our side. The Zelani workers evacuated before we arrived, just like the plan said. General Ryu Sora nodded with cold satisfaction. The plan was working. Perfectly. Hit fast, hit hard, and disappear before the enemy could strike back. It was an old human strategy used by warriors from Earth's ancient past. Lieutenant Colonel Oh Ming-yu floated in the darkness between stars, watching the massive Council shipyard through his biomask. The structure was larger than most moons, home to 50,000 alien workers, and the most advanced starship construction facility in 3 systems. His 10-person team drifted beside him, invisible in their stealth suits. They had traveled for weeks to reach this point, sleeping in pods while their ship moved through hyperspace without its engines running. Now they were ghosts in the void. Remember, he whispered into his comm, we plant the charges in the fusion core stabilizers. When they blow, the whole structure will tear itself apart. But we have exactly 14 minutes to get clear. The said team split up, each person knowing their target by heart. They had practiced this mission 100 times in virtual reality. Every bolt, every corridor, every security checkpoint was memorized. Oh Ming-yu attached his charges to the primary support beam of Fusion Core 7. The explosive device was small enough to fit in his palm, but it contained enough power to crack a small asteroid. Human engineers had gotten very creative in the past months. All charges placed, came the whisper over comm. Beginning extraction. They moved through the facility like deadly shadows. Alien workers walked past them, never seeing the humans, who wore suits that bent light around their bodies. The technology was stolen from the Vorthak themselves, improved by human engineers who understood violence better than any species in the galaxy. Captain Nam. Taeyong commanded the destroyer Incheon Blade as it emerged from hyperspace directly above a council battleship. The alien vessel was massive, bristling with weapons that could level cities, but it had one weakness that humans had learned to exploit. Target their communication array first, he ordered. Then their engines. Leave the crew alive but helpless. The Incheon Blade fired and vanished, jumping back into hyperspace before return fire could arrive. It was a tactic that drove council commanders insane. How do you fight an enemy that won't stand still? The psychological warfare had begun with the first attack. Every time a council ship died, the same message was broadcast. Across all frequencies, you killed our children. This is what humans do to those who harm our families. The message was recorded by a mother whose daughter had died in the bombing of New Seoul School. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. That made it 10 times more terrifying than any scream of rage. Admiral Velkara of the Zelani Commonwealth received the message as her fleet watched a human task force destroy a Vorthak mining station. Her beautiful blue features twisted with concern as she read her tactical displays. The humans are not targeting us directly, reported her aide. They're focusing on Vorthak assets and military installations. Send a message to the Vorthak High Command, Velkara decided. Tell them the Zilani Commonwealth is withdrawing from this conflict immediately. She wasn't the only one. Across the galaxy, Council member species began to question why they were dying for Vorthak pride. The insectoid Clethari pulled their ships back home. The rock-like granites simply turned off their weapons and refused to fight. Even some Vorthak captains began to surrender rather than face the human ghosts. Lieutenant Colonel O Mingyu watched from his escape pod as the shipyard became a flower of light and metal fragments. Billions of credits worth of equipment turned into an expanding cloud of debris. Decades of construction became scrap in seconds. "Strike Team Alpha to command," he reported calmly. "Primary target eliminated. No human casualties. Moving to secondary. Objective." General Ryusora smiled coldly as reports flooded in from across 3 star systems. Industrial targets destroyed, supply lines cut, enemy fleets scattered and demoralized. The humans weren't just winning, they were teaching the galaxy a lesson that would be remembered for 1,000 years. "Phase 1 complete," she announced. "Begin Phase 2. It's time to visit the Council homeworlds." The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council had never seen such silence. 27 different species sat in their assigned seats, but the usual chatter and politics had died. The massive dome overhead showed the stars of 3 systems, where human ships had rewritten the laws of war in just 2 weeks. Ambassador Jo Yuna of the Zilani Commonwealth kept her 4 hands folded in front of her, trying not to look at the empty Vorthak delegation seats. Only 3 Vorthak representatives remained alive after the human retaliation. The proud warrior race that had enforced council law for centuries was now reduced to broken survivors. The chamber doors opened with a soft hum. Every head turned to watch Admiral Park Minji enter. She wore her full dress uniform, the same blue and white colors that Earth had flown since humanity first reached the stars. Behind her walked 12 human officers, each carrying datapads that contained detailed records of council war crimes. Park Minji's boots clicked against the crystal floor as she walked down the center aisle. Council members who had once looked at humans with pity or amusement now watched her with something that looked very much like fear. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to anymore. The Secretary General, a tall being covered in golden feathers, stood as she approached the central podium. His voice device translated his words into dozens of languages. "Admiral Park Minji of the human species," he announced, though his voice shook slightly. "The Council recognizes your presence and awaits your terms." Park Minji placed her datapad on the podium but didn't look at it. She had memorized every word days ago. Her eyes swept across the assembled delegates, noting which species looked ashamed and which still showed defiance. "The human terms are simple," she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. "First, full recognition of human sovereignty over all territory we claim. Second, immediate reparations for the 15,000 civilians murdered in your orbital bombardment. Third, a formal treaty acknowledging Earth as an equal member of this council with full voting rights." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some of the smaller species nodded immediately. They had learned what happened to those who fought humans. The Clethari delegate raised one of its insect arms. "What assurance do we have that humans will follow council laws once admitted?" Park Minji smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "You have the same assurance you gave us when you demanded we abandon our colony, the assurance of superior firepower." High Councillor Vexthar of the Granite Worlds spoke next, his rock-like voice rumbling through the chamber. "The humans destroyed our mining platform at Rigel 7. 3,000 workers died. Those workers were producing weapons to kill human colonists," Park Minji replied without emotion. "We sent warnings. We gave them time to evacuate. Some chose to stay and fight. We honored their choice. The truth hung in the air like poison gas. Everyone knew the humans had been more merciful than the Council ever was. The granite platform could have been vaporized instantly. Instead, the humans had used precision strikes, giving non-combatants time to escape." Ambassador Jo Yuna stood, her voice soft but clear. "The Zilani Commonwealth votes to accept all human terms. We have learned that humanity's greatest weapon is not their technology, but their ability to turn love into rage, and rage into victory." One by one, the votes came in. The Centauri trade. Federation voted yes. The Spiral Arm Alliance agreed. Even species that had never spoken to each other before found themselves united in one simple fact: challenging humans was suicide. The last vote came from Commander Zrak Tal, the broken remains of the Vorthak military. His scales had lost their shine, and one of his arms ended in a bandaged stump where human weapons had taken it. He stood slowly, each movement painful. The Vorthak Empire acknowledges defeat. We vote to accept all human terms. His voice cracked as he continued. We regret ever underestimating the humans' love for their young. The Secretary-General's feathers rustled as he proclaimed the final tally. The motion passes unanimously. The human species is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges thereof. Park Minji nodded once, sharp, and final. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at the assembled delegates. There is one more thing, she said quietly. The human colony on Kepler 442b will be expanded. We're bringing families there, lots of families. Children who will grow up under your sky, playing in gardens we've planted. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Those children will be protected by everything humanity has learned about war. Remember that. As the human delegation left the chamber, conversations began in a dozen languages. Treaties would be written, trade agreements signed. But everyone understood the real message. Earth had taken its place among the stars not through diplomacy or gradual acceptance, but through the most ancient law in the universe. The strong protect their own, and the weak get out of the way, the mom. Age of human expansion had begun, and none would stand against it.